Hello. Hi, everyone. Going to do a slide check. How are we working? Yes. Hi. It's fantastic to be here, and what a crowd as well. The incredible amount of kind of engagement in kind of digital in government. It's really heartwarming to see. Oh, I've got this upside down. There we go. I thought I'd start with a puffin. I really like Iceland. I've been here 4 times now, so it's fantastic to kind of come back. Back in 2007, I did probably the classic tour of the Ring Road. I clambered over some cliffs in Draungey, if I'm getting the pronunciation right. It's a lovely place to be. So thank you for having me. It's also great to be in a country that's better than my own at digital transformation. I prepared this slide, and then somebody pointed out to me that the new stats came out about a week ago. So, good to see you holding your position there at 5th. We've actually recovered a little bit in the UK. The UK story of digital transformation is one of, that had a really, really exciting moment, and I'll be talking about that a bit more. Back in kind of 2012, but we've been kind of up and down since then. 7's good. We'll take 7 for now. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Long time ago now, I was a kind of practicing software developer. Got involved in building software at the Guardian.com. And then on into the BBC, had some real fun around 2012 on the London Olympics, kind of working with kind of data systems and all the stuff that was kind of powering the BBC's presence for the London Olympics. And then I found my way into government. This thing was happening called Government Digital Service. It all looked very exciting, but it also really, really appealed to my sense of doing like very, very purposeful work. And kind of working also within quite challenging environments. I almost got a taste for bureaucracy working at the BBC. I found myself very quickly immersed in justice. So that was my domain for about 7 years. I was the Chief Technology Officer there about 5 years ago. And since then, I've moved into consulting. We didn't like to call it consulting in the early days of public digital because it's a word that conjures up different things for different people. But it is what we are. We think we're doing things a bit differently. So let me tell you a little bit about public digital. This is us. This is us about a year ago now. It's a brilliant group of people. We're a small consultancy, but we're scaling up at the moment. We've got quite a big base in London. We're also based in Nigeria and Canada, so we're a global business. And the people that work for public digital are typically kind of experienced digital transformation professionals. And we do consulting that is kind of based on that experience. So that's us. So as I say, we're a specialist digital transformation consultancy. Some people might describe us as maybe kind of opinionated, or sometimes we're a little bit kind of crunchy with our clients. We kind of like to tell people kind of how it is rather than what they want to hear. And a lot of our clients find that very valuable. And we also really are about kind of helping organizations find those conditions to transform at scale. So we work with a lot of big institutions. We also work with small institutions.
This was scheduled. We're fine.
Excellent. Whew. Okay. And some of our clients. We got some very cool clients here. We've got a very diverse client base. We don't specialize in any industry. We are known for our government work. Our founders are the founders of Government Digital Service, but we're moving into kind of more diverse set of industries as we grow. A few glimpses of some of the stories there.
Sorry, element of surprise.
It's really fascinating. For example, we helped the Premier League get fans back in stadiums at the tail end of COVID, which was a really complex kind of service design technology problem to solve. We helped the state of California with the COVID response. We do really broad work, like helping the whole of the BBC with digital ways of working, and then kind of operating model in gnarly kind of regulated areas like banking and in HSBC. So some really interesting work. But anyway, enough about that. So I thought I'd try and define digital transformation. I don't think it's a phrase that gets defined very much. I'm slightly cheating. I'm building on top of a relatively well-known definition of digital by one of my colleagues and founders of the company, Tom Loosemore, but trying to add the word transformation on and then make sense of it. This is my definition. Purposeful and impactful change to culture, processes, business models, and technologies to help an organization meet people's ever-raising expectations. I think the two most important parts about this definition, first of all, technologies last in a list of things that matter when you do digital transformation. It's important, but it's last in the list, with culture first. And the second thing is this kind of notion of ever-raising expectations. We often talk about digital as maybe a moment of fundamental shift that happened when the internet came along, or the internet kind of scaled up into people's lives. But I think that sense of ever-raising expectations is something we're starting to feel, with new technologies, new kind of ways of interacting with those technologies, and new impacts on society. So we think that it's constantly shifting, and we've got to keep up. I'm going to talk about the human impact of digital transformation. So I kind of use three words to kind of hook different kind of sections of this talk. So I'm going to talk about hope, fear, and then trust as kind of three themes. I'm going to be telling stories from 8 to 10 years ago. There's a reason for that. It's what it is really is it's the emotional distance that you get a decade after you did work, combined with the ability to place it in the context of your following experiences, I think, certainly, I feel, gives me a richer understanding of what happened at the time. So I'm going to be telling you those older stories because I think I can unpack them a little bit more interestingly than, say, the work that I'm doing right now with different organizations in PD. The thing about digital transformation is you do it with people, and you do it over a very long period of time, typically. Yes, there are those moments where, you build a new service in 8 weeks or something, and it's an exciting moment, a new policy, a greenfield delivery or something. But a lot of digital transformation is actually hard yards over a long period of time, and you do that with people, and therefore it's an emotional experience. And I want to talk about both positive, like characteristically positive or negative emotions. So I'll be talking about hope, but I'll also talk about fear, because I do think that things like fear can lead to very positive effects in terms of how you respond to that and how groups of people kind of respond to that. And really, I'm going to talk a lot about how it felt for me, but I'm going to try and see if I can kind of understand what other people were feeling who were there at the time as well. Obviously, I've spoken to people, I've heard reflections and observations and so on, so I'm trying to build that in as well. I'll start with hope. So in 2014, in London, in the UK, I felt part of something incredible. I was about a year into joining government digital service. I'd previously been working at the BBC, a kind of bewildering kind of bureaucracy, but doing some really fun things like the London Olympics, into a very, very purposeful environment trying to deliver sensitive, important government services. And GDS seemed to be doing this in a kind of radical way, whole new types of thinking, new language, new style, new culture, and it was very exciting. You can see some of the excitement there. I mean, some things like the bunting and the cake, maybe they're kind of throwaway and they're not around as often as they used to be, but that signaling of difference and of change was very important at the time. And I was part of this thing that was transforming across government. So at the centre of GDS, they were transforming gov.uk, the nation's website, platforms, but there were 25 exemplars out in government departments in kind of deeper areas of transformation, and I was involved in the justice ones. I'm going to show you a short video.
Civil claims are essentially the thing you do when you're seeking civil justice. They're mostly money claims or property claims, so somebody owes you money or somebody owes you your property back.
Any landlords can use this claim. We've targeted it at non-professional landlords, so people like you and me who may happen to have a property that they rent out. They could use this form if at the end of a tenancy agreement they need to take the property back.
The manual process will be a landlord will go to the court and get a form N5B, which was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 pages, and wade through these questions which were written in impenetrable legalese.
So the new process should be you go on gov.uk, that will then take you through to our form. You go through all the instructions and fill in the form on the website.
We've made the thing a lot simpler by just hiding half of the questions. The second thing we've focused on doing is turning what was heavily legalese into much plainer English.
It's important for 2 reasons. One is to improve the citizens' access to law. The other reason is to reduce the cost, inherent cost in dealing with these claims.
So you kind of, maybe you can kind of get a sense of the kind of hope in that video. So that was back in 2014, and it was a brilliant team. It's quite a few of the team I kind of still know, still in contact with, and the spirit of hope that they had at that time was really an offshoot of the kind of broader digital government movement. You had kind of GDS at the center of government doing and building exciting things. Out in justice, we had 4 exemplars. This was just one of them. As a video itself, as a piece of marketing material, I think it gives you a sense of hope. I remember watching these videos at events like this in digital government. And the language that people are using is kind of aspirational. It's kind of showing you, look, there's something different here. There's something quite powerful in what this is doing, and it's going to change people's lives. It's a team that I'd say had 2 hopes. I think one set of hopes was targeted on what they were trying to achieve as a team. And then one set of hopes was more the community that they felt part of. So they felt they were there to transform the whole of government. They were part of that community, but they were there really focusing in on these specific things called civil claims in our kind of justice system. Sadly, 10 years later, it's the same paper form. It's the same N5B form. I think at the moment you go onto gov.uk, great. Press the Start Now button, and you end up eventually having to download this PDF form. Maybe you fill it in using Acrobat, maybe you print it off. The service isn't very good. The language on the form is still legalese. And I kind of tell this story because there's another part to it, which is that team who were kind of inspired, and they were doing good work. They were doing really good design work. They were doing really good software development work. They were doing really good getting under the skin of kind of policy and procurement and all of the different factors that were relevant to success. And the energy that was created by them and those around them in the rest of digital justice and those around them in the rest of UK government really have gone on to be a transformative community. Just to kind of like give you a sense of like the kind of where I think that diaspora of thinking has kind of gone over the subsequent 10 years. You've got other services like Check If You Can Get Legal Aid at the Ministry of Justice that were transformed and remain transformed, and they're far better than they used to be. You've got services that were delivered in the last 6 months by the same team. Effectively the same entity kind of 12 years later is now delivering, for example, services to prisoners. Prisoners have laptops in their cells and they can access services to do, for example, online banking. They can book the sports facilities. Prisoners didn't even have laptops 12 years previously. And so this kind of new expansion of that digital thinking kind of right out into the depths of the state is still happening in justice. This is a great example. This is gov.uk notify kind of, this is gov.uk one login. This is also a kind of contemporary product. This is what GDS are working on right now. It's a kind of new identity system. It's taking new design principles. It's learning from the mistakes of previous identity systems. And then to kind of, this is my favorite example of the real kind of depth of what's happening with this movement that I think many of you in this room might feel part of. This is at Madagascar's website, government website. So in Madagascar, over the last maybe 5 years or so, they've appointed a chief digital officer. They've grown more confident in what they do with digital. You can now do services like registering a business in Madagascar, and you can do that online. Starts on the website. The website opens up, and you can see services. There are many parts of the world that still haven't kind of made these kind of progressions. But for a place like Madagascar to do it, that really doesn't have the resources of countries like the UK and Iceland, is a fantastic achievement. So it's a story of the hope of the community is a powerful one, even if those kind of localized disappointments are there. You might ask kind of why did that thing not succeed? Why did it become a form again 12 years later? I think it's incredibly complicated. You can dissect it. It's all these different factors around the internal politics of the organization, incumbent suppliers, procurement problems, legal problems, a sense of one of the key problems was that it was one of only 55 civil claims. So the business case, the return on investment, was starting to kind of melt halfway through the delivery. But I could go on and on. There really are a complex set of reasons why it failed, and I don't think that's not the focus today. But it's just important to understand that not all of these transformative initiatives will succeed. So I thought I'd just quickly touch on how did this hope feel and what did others maybe feel. So there was a real sense of belief in the team and of what they could achieve. When that video was shot, the belief was really, really strong. A strong sense of purpose. Helping landlords might not be top of people's list of a sense of purpose, but if you zoom out to justice and look at all the services that are provided, there's a real sense of kind of purpose and value for people in a justice system. And a confidence that they'd chosen the right path. That sense of like, we're going to build this software, we've got the design system, we can show you how these pieces are going to fit together. Confident enough to produce a video with a URL on it that subsequently never went live. What did other people think? So there's a lot of other people kind of in the mix. There were definitely people that felt excluded by this hope. If you were teams that maybe had been around before this kind of movement swept into the organization, you might have felt excluded. If your profession wasn't one of the kind of named professions considered digital, you might feel excluded. There was probably a kind of cliquey aspect to the kind of the sweep of the cultural movement at the time. And people have spoken to me afterwards that they genuinely felt excluded, and therefore, to some extent, kind of maybe vindicated by the disappointing story, but not vindicated by the much broader story that happened. Frustration or idealism. If you really dissect what's going on with that kind of particular delivery that I showed the video for, there were hints of idealism in there because I think people weren't looking at the economics of the whole thing. They weren't looking at the supply chain. They weren't looking at the capability of the organizations involved. And those things kind of came to trip people up eventually. And a sense of skepticism from those that had maybe tried similar things before, or they felt that what they'd done before was similar. So it's a real kind of mixed set of emotions that come out of the story, both at the moment of hope and then the later moment of disappointment. I'll talk about that disappointment too. So towards the end of this initiative, there was obviously a kind of moment when people started to realize it wasn't going to get delivered, and all the different kind of reasons were coming to the surface. People felt frustration at those they felt were standing in the way, people that wouldn't give approvals, people that either owned incumbent contracts or were part of the supply chain who had a vested interest in the status quo. a sense of regret for not adapting, not spotting these things in advance. Kind of go into it as a kind of probably too much as a software delivery project and not enough kind of really zooming out to the full service design perspective. I think that very broad service design perspective wasn't as strong back then in 2014 as it is today in UK digital government. But almost everyone who was on that team, probably, particularly with a lot of hindsight, really felt they learned something. They learned something through that disappointment. Why did it go wrong? What would we do different next time? And I actually think a lot of the advancements we see in digital government are actually a result of people previously being disappointed with something that they tried to deliver, but seeing where the flaws were and the faults and what they could do better next time. And in a sense of what others felt, definitely some schadenfreude. People said it was coming. People saw it coming. Frustration at not being consulted. You know, there were people in the organization who held roles or job titles where you might assume they'd be heavily consulted. But at the time, this was quite ruthless, targeted transformation. And that means lots of people don't get consulted who, you know, perhaps on paper should have been consulted. And that real sense of like, you didn't bring people along with you, you didn't kind of build the relationships that were necessary. And a relief at not needing to change. There were some people, you know, let's say, for example, you're a contract manager for the incumbent supplier who runs the tech behind producing the forms and processing the forms. You don't have to change. You don't have to move to a new contract. In fact, they kept the contract maybe for another 12 years. I don't know for sure. So there's a real sense of relief for people that don't have to change. But I think digital transformation needs hope that change is possible, even when there's great uncertainty. Like, I don't regret that moment of hope. I don't think that moment of hope was a bad thing because that individual project went wrong. I think you need that level of hope to be able to kind of push through and do something bold and transformative. It just won't always work. But hope without the appetite and ability to adapt will lead to disappointment. So if you go at these kind of transformative moments with a kind of almost a hubristic sense of like we will deliver, the plan is certain, the plan is faultless, you're almost certainly going to be disappointed because these things, in a sense, these things never go to plan. You always surface new, fascinating things that characterize the transformation. That's enough about hope. Let's talk about fear. So I think this is 2016 now. A similar era. So back in that time, it was a thriving and confident community in every sense. Like the broad cross-government community was thriving and confident. Justice Digital was thriving and confident. Maybe even a sense of fearlessness, a sense of like, look, we've proven ourselves quite a few times now. We can kind of deliver these new services, we can sustain these new services, we're getting more confident on the broader picture, whether it's kind of cybersecurity or cloud engineering, or even like new areas like kind of FinOps. We felt confident. Then this happened. This was 2019. The entire court system basically went down for 2 weeks. It was in various papers. It had a huge impact on people's lives. If you're, for example, if you're involved in a family law process, it's a hugely emotional experience. You lose your court slot, might not be booked for several weeks afterwards. So you were expecting your moment of justice. You've probably gone through pain, anxiety, cost, and then it doesn't happen because the IT goes down and the digital goes down. I'm going to talk in a second about why that happened, but first of all, we're going to talk about the emotions. So, what did this fear feel like? So this was an institutional moment. The whole of the Ministry of Justice, to a degree, particularly the court system, really felt this moment. And it doesn't matter whether it was like your job or you had a sense of like it being your fault, or you were actually part of the very specific thing that went wrong. It was really an institutional moment of like, we haven't got this right. Why did this go wrong? there was anxiety about future failure. Like, is this going to happen again? Like, what's going on with our estate? Have we got too much legacy? Are we vulnerable to cybersecurity problems? By the way, this was not a cyber incident. This was just failure. Lots of people felt unheard. There were people who'd maybe been talking about these problems for years. Why aren't we paying down our technical debt? Why aren't we dealing with our legacy systems fast enough? Why are we spending all our money on kind of new shiny things and not on the old things? I think anger, potentially, at the uncomfortable truths that were hidden. I still think most organizations hold deeply uncomfortable truths about the state of not just their technology, their services, their processes. The performance of government services even is not really often fully surfaced. We love being open. I think that was, if our translation worked correctly, then I think you were talking, that was part of the introduction, like a belief in the openness. I think we're still at a very early stage of that openness in digital government. And that's where that anger comes from, because there are uncomfortable truths in the organization that people don't feel heard. What do I think others felt? So the others here are maybe kind of others outside of digital transformation. It'd be hard to say whether this went wrong because of the digital transformation. It's a very complicated situation. But people felt let down by the hope. People have been kind of watching videos like that, going to events like this, hearing big speakers talking about, the grand change that is coming. And then things like that, things like the outage happen, and it really jars with that sense of hope. This particularly happened with some of the bigger cyber incidents that hit us after this event as well. Anger at various parties or individuals. People go to blame. They think, oh, maybe the cybersecurity team let us down. Turns out it wasn't a cyber incident. Maybe the supplier let us down because they weren't maintaining the service properly, or there were hundreds of parties that you could blame in this, and people did feel angry about it. And it validated a lot of people's prejudices. If you spoke to a lot of people in the organization in the weeks following it, everyone had their own narrative as to kind of why it happened, and picking out different, sources of blame or narratives that matched their previous beliefs. Why did it happen? Really complicated. Not the story for today. The word systemic is probably the most common word in there, like real gnarly problems like legacy technology, like how the money works in government, how it's easier to get money for a project than it is to kind of maintain something, governance, politics. Justice is not something that usually wins votes. It's quite a neglected part of most Western democracies. It's complicated. So fear combined with this is the positive side, okay? So fear combined with a spirit of optimism can create the passion for more resilient, more sustainable, and better performing services. So going through this personally, and a lot of the people that went through this with me have developed a passion for more sustainable government as a result of this. It's hard to say if the passion was as strong before. I don't think it was. But going through these events, I've got a colleague who was part of a cyber attack in local government, and I do think it's become one of the things he's most passionate about, because he had to go through the full process of dealing with the cyber incident, dealing with the fallout of the cyber incident, dealing with the reputational impact of the cyber incident, and it can really kind of change you as an individual when you go through that. It's an example of the kind of maybe some of the kind of positive impact. So in 2016, I would say technical debt was a fairly invisible concept, localized to software teams. By 2024, it was really part of UK government strategy and a term that is used far more commonly, sometimes even by ministers. And I think that shift is as a result of events like this and then a really positive response to them. So many of the fears that we had in 2014 digital government became a reality. Our kind of fear of the unsustainability of the estate kind of manifesting. But by 2024, I think digital government can go a lot further by learning from this. So learning that, yes, we need that incredibly kind of positive, hopeful narrative about what digital government can do. That's real. It's like everyone's seen the impact. but having that kind of sense of, but there are also lessons to learn about that kind of harder side of sustainability, cybersecurity. And when I say sustainability, I mean in the very broadest sense, sustainability of skills and leadership and culture and processes and so on. Now I'm going to talk about trust. So this was a very similar event. Far less kind of good chandeliers, obviously, but this was in the basement of the Ministry of Justice in the UK. But it was a really interesting event because it was the coming together of the cross-government digital community, but it was under the banner of justice. I feel like in my entire career, and I've done a lot of stuff in justice, this was the only moment where justice had the limelight. It's usually not justice that gets the limelight. It was fun. And part of that is a really interesting story of trust. So I'm going to talk about two organisations. Ministry of Justice, that's where I worked. Cabinet Office, for many years they actually paid my salary even though I worked over there because I was kind of an imposter. But eventually I went over. But that's GDS over there in part of Cabinet Office in the UK. Cabinet Office, if you're not sure in the UK, it's right at the centre of government. It's kind of the central coordinating kind of part of government. And then there's two little teams. And I mean little, I mean, 2 pizza teams, 12 people, multidisciplinary, delivering services. The team that I was close to was called Send Money to Prisoners, and there was this other team called gov.uk Pay. Now, the interesting point about this moment in time, 2016, Send Money to Prisoners didn't exist. You sent cash through the post to actual prisons. Terrible for money laundering, etc. So there's a lot of opportunity for improving that. Gov.uk Pay didn't really exist. It was an idea. Why don't we do government payments in the same way across government? Great idea. And they were kind of trying to build a platform, and they had, I think, around 3 different partners across government they were working with. But there was an institutional fault line right down the middle of this. Sorry to use a geological metaphor here, but there was a real kind of, I don't know if it's the same in Iceland, but certainly in the UK, between the big departments of state, really big kind of barriers. It's very hard to work across them. They are kind of fiefdoms of power, fiefdoms of money. They're often very different communities. But it wasn't like that in 2016. There was this kind of weird bridge of trust. This whole digital thing was a community that was somehow kind of bridging across from the centre of government to departments. We were using kind of Slack to talk to each other quite a lot. We were going to events together. Some people were friends. There was a real sense of actually strong trust between these two teams, which is actually a really weirdly rare thing at this kind of macro level across these fault lines. This is the service. I can't show you any more of this service because I don't know anyone who's in prison, so I can't put a number in and get to the next screen. But as far as I know, it just goes to a basic, credit card payment, Google Pay, all the things you might expect for, like you see on a kind of retail site. It allows you to get money to a prisoner. You might wonder why prisoners need money. So within a prison, there is still a small economy. You can buy things from the shop. You can pay for activities, resources, educational resources, which is, it's an important part of keeping people part of normal society. When in prison, you don't want to kind of, just take away their ability to kind of use money. So it's a very valuable thing, and friends and family is typically the source of that money. This is gov.uk Pay. This is from today. Gov.uk Pay has become a service that I think does hundreds of services across UK government, if not thousands. Sorry, I might know thousands. Let's go with thousands. It's really scaled up. Remember, it was 3 back in 2016, just 3, and none of them were live. Now, what was really interesting about this moment is to get that to work, there had to be a huge amount of trust, because you had to trust the platform was going to become the platform that it is today. The platform had to trust that the service team could actually deliver a service, because if the services all failed, the platform fails. People would, go, oh look, it's not succeeded. It's not actually taking any real payments. So the 2 parties needed each other, and they trusted each other. did they trust each other because there was a document like a RACI or a business case that pinned them down and said, we will work together? There might have been. I don't think there was. I mean, certainly not a very formal one. It was actually built on human relationships and trust. And I do think a lot of the most powerful transformation I see in government usually is working outside of that formal documented space. So the trust which crosses boundaries, the boundaries of organizations and accountability is rare, but it can be the spark for the most successful transformation. I think I reflected that rareness is important. I think we've maybe created this narrative that like digital transformation requires lots of trust all the time between all parties. I don't think that's achievable. I think you have to seize on moments where there are good relationships that kind of cross the boundaries that you have to work across, and you have to seize the moment where the team trust each other and they trust other teams, because generally speaking, a lot of people don't know each other. Certainly kind of the scale we're operating in the UK, like you're consistently coming across stakeholders and dependents and so on that you've just never met before and you've got to work with. So getting that trust is quite rare. But when there's momentum to change, there's always excluded groups. So there were people that didn't feel part of this thing that was happening. We blogged about this a lot. I think there were probably some videos. It was a very exciting moment in government. But there were other people who, maybe rightly or wrongly at the time, were saying this is one small service, it's one small platform that's completely unproven. Why all this limelight when, for example, we've got to run 80,000 laptops for the entire court system, or we've got to do this huge kind of networking infrastructure for courts across the land, or these huge nation-scale problems that people were solving. Some of those people felt neglected. And perhaps rightly so, because they were the same people who were not getting the funding and attention and strategic kind of support they needed to be able to make their services sustainable. The reason that kind of outage happened is actually partly due to the neglect of our networking services. But these stories were happening at the same time. So people in another organization felt part of our team. This is from the perspective of the MOJ. The people in gov.uk Pay, they felt like our team. It was kind of one team formed of two parts. And that, again, I'd say that's quite a rare moment. We were able to be completely honest with each other. Like if bits of the platform didn't work, they told us. If we were finding problems with operationalizing the service, we told them. Again, that's something that often doesn't happen with these types of relationships. The two parties might create convenient narratives for each other and then get tripped up when the truth comes out. And we felt emboldened by being part of something bigger. It was a small service, but being part of that kind of bigger picture and bootstrapping a platform for government, that was really exciting. As I say, there was a resentment of the limelight at the time. A real pressure on business as usual. The Ministry of Justice, when I was CTO there, I was responsible for around 400 complex systems. And most of those were of the category of long neglected, built long ago, obscured in our supply chain. A very small number of them were these kind of newer, shinier, exciting, boundary-pushing services. So that pressure on business usual was very real. And a threat to maybe their kind of job or way of thinking from going away. Like if a project like that gov.uk Pay thing succeeded, there were lots of other people who had maybe jobs managing the supply chain of kind of commercial payment systems, or managing the rooms in all of the prisons where they count the cash. This was real people who maybe they wouldn't lose their job, maybe they get kind of reallocated to something else, but the impact on them was real. So, 2024, this year. I'm just going to do a little bit of a kind of reflection on those three stories, really. So, first of all, I want to say that our emotional responses to change determine if and when digital transformation succeeds or fails, and what roles we play in that. So, I think a lot of the time when we talk about whether digital transformation is going to succeed or fail, we might talk about, is the business case solid? Is there a good return on investment? Are we applying the right digital standards to accessibility, service design, technical architecture, software development? These are all important things, but I do actually think when it's true transformation, so it involves changing the status quo in a way that affects people, the emotional responses that people have, and how they respond to those. So if it's a very negative situation for you, but you respond to it with learning and positivity. If it's a very positive situation for you, but you've got the kind of humility and empathy to recognize that you might be in a cultural bubble, and not everyone's experiencing that. These are the things that can start to kind of make the digital transformation succeed. And this is on a very personal note, really, but it's my experiences of going through those stories, and the kind of the hope, fear, and sense of trust that I kind of felt has kind of led me to what I do today. So what I do today is I help organizations go through these kinds of changes at scale. And what I learned through those emotional experiences has kind of given me the kind of pieces to put together to be able to kind of speak to people about how this works. Thank you.